let's talk about sewn-in elastics. Basically what that is, I don't know if you can see on my shirt, this is my sleeve and it's got an elastic here. It's not encased. From the encased video, you saw that we create a double fold hem through which we feed the elastic. This is not the case. What they have done here, they sewn the elastic directly on the edge of the fabric. So how are we going to do that? You're going to sew the elastic right on the edge. Of course, you're going to stretch it all the way. And then after you've done that, you're going to flip it over and reinforce it right here to make sure it doesn't flip over. This is really good for waistbands. And for this particular pair of pants, they've done it 3 times. So first they did they first sewn the elastic to the edge. Then they did 1, 2, 3, all the way around to make sure the elastic does not twist inside of the band. Don't you just hate that when you're wearing a pair of pants and the elastic twists? So let's go ahead and see how we're going to do this. What you want to do is measure your elastic, whatever size is good for you. And then you want to pin it at both ends. Because one thing you don't want to do is to be real curly and bunched up over here, and then here is real straight. With this type, it doesn't matter because the elastic moves inside of the casing. But with this one, the elastic will not move. So like I said, what you don't want to do is have it really curly over there and then this is straight. That would not look good. So what you want to do is divide this equally. You do end to end and then middle of the fabric to the middle of the elastic. If it's a very long elastic, you might want to divide it again into quarters. So let's do that. Here's my second pin for the end. And I'm going to show you a trick when you get to the very end, so you don't cut your finger, you don't sew your fingers. All right, I want to mark the middle of my elastic to the middle of my fabric. The middle of my fabric is right there. And you can, if you want to, do the clip to mark it. You see what I did there? I created that little notch. And then half of the elastic is right there. So I am going to match this with this. That way I know my elastic is distributed evenly. And you want to pin it vertically, not horizontally, because if you pin it this way, when you stretch it, your pin may come out. But if it's this way, it will not come out. All right, so let's go to the sewing machine and add this to... I apologize for my camera. It's a hanging on my neck type gizmo, and it moves when I move. I hope it's not making you nauseous. All right, so we're going to reinforce this guy. We're not worried about stretching it just yet, but you do need to hold your threads. So put the needle down, set the foot down, hold your threads, and reinforce a little bit. Okay, now our first priority is not all the way down, okay? We're going to work in sections. Here's my half mark, and we're going to do that. But we might even go even smaller than that. I'm stretching it, and we might go even smaller than we might just decide to hold it right here, okay? You need to hold these strings because the elastic now has tension on it. And you have to pull it back. All right, now we're going to do the next step. You see how we got more fabric than elastic? That's okay because we're going to stretch the elastic over it. I cannot sew a straight line to save my life. And then we're going to continue all the way to the end. And that's another good reason why you want to put the pins that direction. You can run over it with a needle without breaking your needle. All right, so here's the trick I was telling you about earlier. When you get to this very end, you're not going to be able to hold it with your fingers. So what I do, I put a safety pin in there. Go ahead and take this out. And then I use this guy to pull. See, my fingers are out of the way. And I'm just going to do that. Okay. Now I can take it out and finish it off. All right. There's my crooked line, but we don't care. Not for a sample. Okay, so now what we want to do is fold it over. See how it is curly like that? We want to fold it over and sew over the top. Of course, you should have probably finished the raw edge first, but for this particular exercise, we're not gonna. Okay, so the idea is for this to be up against the elastic, not too much like that, okay? And also not too tight that it does this to the elastic. So we're going to match this first end and get started. Put your needle in, hold your threads back, set the foot down, reinforce. Okay, so now again, we're going to work in small sections. Make sure that this is way up against that. You don't want it to be too tight, you don't want it to be too loose. And you do need to tug on it because the elastic needs to be stretched. So I'm tugging my threads at the back. All right, let's stop and reposition. Anytime you stop and reposition, you put your needle down, because if your needle is not down, when you tug on it, it'll get the needle somewhere else, and you don't want to do that. All right, so let's work for the next section. Tug it real good. Here we go. Ready? We're just going to work in small sections. Next small section. Now maybe I should do one without putting the needle down to show you what happens when you pull on it and the needle is not down and you completely lose your place. All right, so again, when we're going to get to the end, you see how it does that? And I'm not going to put my finger there. Sorry, I'm not that brave. So I'm just going to use my safety pin to pull it. I can't see because the camera is directly in my view, but let's see what we can do. All right, let's take the pin out. Maybe I can do a few more stitches before I take it out. All right, and finish it off. Okay, so there it is. This is a sewn-in elastic. It's not twisting. Now, if you want to do a second stitch or a third stitch like we had on that pair of pants, you can do that. And at this point, in order to make it a circle, you would do this. Again, don't do a very narrow seam allowance because your fabric might come undone if you sew too close to the edge. But also don't do a very deep seam allowance because why are you wasting the fabric? So, you know, think about how you want it to look. Reinforce. And then you finish whatever your project. Let's say this is a sleeve. All right, where's my clippers? You know what I need? I need a cameraman. That's what I need. All right, so this is your sleeve, and it's not twisting around. That elastic is in there safe, or a cuff for your pants, or top of a skirt for a very tiny person. Make sure you finish your edges. You never want to leave raw edges like that because they will fray. So make sure you zigzag it. And as I said earlier, we should have also zigzagged that raw edge of the fabric before we did anything. So there you have it. This is called Sewn-In Elastic.